Efforts to help students succeed after high school.
The initial data we have from schools is showing a 3% increase in graduation rates.
What's the latest on healthcare policy in Washington?
We think it's a great thing that the Senate does not have the votes to pass that.
And why the sheriff wants the state to investigate his department. This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Andrea Kelly. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin this week with a program that's been trying to increase high school graduation numbers and the options for students after they achieve that milestone. That's coming up after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
Senator John McCain's office announced this week he has an aggressive form of brain cancer. His surgeons say they removed all the cancer and now a course of chemotherapy and radiation will begin. After the announcement, Senator McCain sent out a tweet thanking people for the well wishes and also promising he'll be back at work soon. The diagnosis does raise questions. What happens if the senator cannot serve out his term? He's only months into his 6th term. The law is clear. The governor appoints someone to take the seat until the next statewide election. That appointment must be a Republican since Senator McCain is a Republican. The boards for the Golder Ranch and Mountain Vista fire districts approved the consolidation of the two departments this week. The decision means Mountain Vista will cease to exist. Mountain Vista Fire Chief Cheryl Horvath says the public will not see changes in service, nor does she anticipate a loss of jobs. The move will stabilize the tax rate charged by the departments. The decision to consolidate the departments north of Tucson was made after a series of public meetings in the area. Arizona's unemployment rate stayed flat at 5.1% in June, according to the state's Office of Economic Opportunity. On its surface, the June jobs report often appears to be bad news for Arizona's economy. The state shed nearly 43,000 jobs last month, but officials with the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity say those losses were expected. They're all related to education and the leisure and hospitality industries. For more on this week's stories, you can always visit our website.
A program to help high school students graduate, then quickly move on to work or school, got a boost last week. The Community Schools Initiative is funded in large part by AmeriCorps, the domestic version of the Peace Corps volunteer service program. Ben Olson runs the Community Schools Initiative in Tucson. He says the federal support to continue the program is a stamp of approval.
We had some really significant impact in the schools that we're working in the first 2 years, and that was really a lot of the basis of why CNCS, or the Corporation for National and Community Service, decided to invest for 3 more years in the program and is actually increasing the investment so that we can expand to adding additional couple schools. So we're really excited for that investment moving forward.
Walk me through how it works.
Yeah.
Who are the people working in these schools? How do you find them, and what are they doing?
Yeah, so I'll start with the community schools model initially, just so your viewers are aware of this. Community schools recognizes that low-income students and families as well really struggle with a variety of barriers and needs that can't be met by the school. Teachers across our community do amazing work, but they don't have the resources to provide food security, healthcare, and counseling. So the community schools model is developing a series of partnerships with nonprofits across the community to help them work with the school and provide integrated supports for students and families. So we use AmeriCorps members, and these are people, recent college graduates, college students from a variety of different backgrounds, all the way up to recent retirees who we hire and are funded by these CNCS grants to serve both on the school sites, working directly with students and families, as well as serving with nonprofits, helping them scale up everything from, again, behavioral health services, set up school-based food pantries with Community Food Bank, and a wide variety of other services to help ensure students' basic needs are met and they can focus on learning in the classroom.
And take us through some of the numbers that you were able to get to in the first couple years of the program. How has it worked?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first year, we were able to connect 2,800 students and over 200 families with various programs and services. Most of these services are provided directly by AmeriCorps members, and then some are provided by outside referrals. So if we're working with a student, if identified they're struggling with some trauma, have been really haven't been able to focus in the classroom because of this, our AmeriCorps members are not trained clinicians, so we can refer them to Kodak, La Frontera, or other behavioral health agencies for more specialized services. In the second year, we were able to connect over 4,500 students, which is about half the total of the students in these 8 schools that we're working with a variety of different support services. That is a unduplicated number. We've worked to make sure so some students have actually participated in multiple services. But yeah, almost doubled the amount of number of students that we're supporting from the first year to the second.
And then graduation and then moving on to career or high school, how has that success, have you seen success?
Yeah, we have. It's preliminary data at this point because school graduation rates, the official Department of Education data isn't released yet. But the initial data we have from schools is showing a 3% increase in graduation rates. And that's actually before the summer school graduations. That actually could increase slightly. On the college access side, the principals we're working with identified FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, as the primary driver for college access. And this is supported by a lot of research that if you can get a low-income student and family to complete the FAFSA and see that they actually get a Pell Grant, they can get $6,000 for school. And with Pima Community College, that can actually cover all of their costs for the year. So a family who might have seen this as inaccessible now really understands, like, college is within reach. We were able to increase the FAFSA completion rate at these schools by 9.5% in the first 2 years. And then college-going rates, the data is imperfect here, but it looks like there was about an 8% increase in the rate of students going to college. The reason this is imperfect is because it's collected on student surveys of students who are graduating, and there's methodological challenges with student reporting, but that does correlate really nicely with the FAFSA data, which is directly from the federal government. So that's pretty strong data.
So why do this as an AmeriCorps program, using people who are, pretty low paid and basically acting as volunteers? I mean, why that model?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and is something we've discussed a lot with our school superintendents and other partners. If you look at a lot of other communities that have implemented the community schools model, such as New York City, Chicago schools, many of them have hired full-time permanent staff to act as school coordinators in the role that we have AmeriCorps members. And I think that is probably an ideal scenario. Unfortunately, here in Arizona, we don't see enough of an investment in our education system where schools would have the option to hire full-time permanent staff in these roles. So to some degree, it is a compromise in that I think AmeriCorps members in an ideal scenario could really augment full-time professional staff that stay year after year. But with the resource scarcity in our education system here in Arizona, that's not really a viable option. And we're really struggling just to hire and retain enough teachers in the classroom, and additional student support staff just isn't in the cards right here. So AmeriCorps, it is a scalable resource, and we have this as a great investment. So it does provide an excellent leadership opportunity for young professionals, and we've actually had several of our schools hire multiple members after each year into permanent full-time roles in the schools.
I remember 2 years ago when the first round of this was started, it sort of came on the heels of the mayor's poverty commission, and which was to look into ways to reduce the poverty rate in Tucson. So any data that shows those are working and it's linking that solution to that problem?
Yeah, so the Mayor's Poverty Commission was originally conducted research through University of Arizona to see what works to address poverty on this macro scale, so not just individual programs and services. A lot of the research did focus on bundling services, so helping families access a spectrum of services simultaneously rather than just a single intervention. And the idea is their families are facing many different issues simultaneously, maybe attached to health issues, food security, legal issues. So if you can provide those wraparound services, it's much more effective at promoting social and economic mobility. So we do have that on site, and I think we have not seen any shifts at the macro community level in terms of decreasing the percentage of the population that's in poverty. I think to really do that, this would have to be scaled up in almost every school across Tucson, and at this stage, we don't have the resources to do that. There have been some cities across the country, Cincinnati in particular, was able to scale up this model in all schools across the entire city, and they were over a 6-year period able to see about a 20% increase in graduation rates, while that you're just having students and families getting additional support and helping promote their mobility now, that change in educational outcomes drastically impacts whether people are in poverty longer term. So I think this model, it is effective, and we're seeing the results, but right now, we're going into 10 schools next year. We would probably need to be in 100 schools to really impact the total poverty rate for Tucson on a long-term trajectory.
Staying with education, our next story is an update on the State Board of Education. The board oversees public schools in Arizona. Its 11 members include the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, university and community college presidents, teachers, and members of the public. Calvin Baker is superintendent of the Vail School District and is also on the state board. He joined me for an update on both, beginning with the top priority for the State Board of Education.
State Board of Education has been working for the entire past year to come up with new criteria for the A through F labeling system or grading system for schools and school districts. That system has been finalized, so now we are shifting into determining where are the breakpoints in the scoring. At what point does an A become B and does a B become a C?
So the thresholds between the grades.
Correct.
Okay. And then what's the biggest challenge at this point?
Well, the biggest challenge is that's a
Same
really
thing.
hard decision to make because not only does it have to do with the reputation of the school, but after legislation this year, there's real dollars attached to schools that get A's, and for charter schools who get a D or an F, they face the threat of closure. So it's more than just a label. It has some very significant consequences. So it's very difficult to make those decisions.
So what kinds of things are you grappling with as you try to make those threshold determinations or those cut points?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that occurred is that we moved away, at least especially at the high school level, to more of a reliance on other criteria besides a single test score. So, for example, 20% of the grade is based on college and career readiness, like completing a career and technical edge sequence or passing, doing well on the ACT test or the SAT test. So we don't know exactly how those scores are going to fall out because we haven't done it that way before. So trying to determine where the natural breaks are going to be by looking at the data and looking at the scores. That's what we're doing.
And this year the state expanded the vouchers program for schools. How does that affect schools' education in Arizona?
Well, we're not sure yet. And the state board actually has very little to do with that. The state board, in terms of legislation that was passed this year, probably more involved with setting up new rules for the changes that have occurred with teacher certification.
Okay. And as the Vail School District Superintendent, I'm guessing you're also unsure how that new voucher expansion affects that district?
Correct, although we are in a fortunate situation that we are growing and we have a really good reputation, so we have a problem of having to deal with the students who are moving into the district. We'd love to serve more students from outside the district, but we simply don't have the capacity. So we, in Vail, are not greatly concerned about this issue.
What are you concerned about? What is kind of top of the chart for Vail right
The top of the chart for us is, as usual, is its funding for schools and specifically for teachers. We have hired 110 teachers so far this year. We still have 10 vacancies, and since we have a lot of positions, there's always a certain amount of turnover. And it's been just really difficult, very challenging to find the top quality candidates that we require for our system.
So what are some of the steps you take when you're trying to recruit? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming you look to the universities in the state, but where else do you go?
We look at universities in the state. We are also very aggressive at holding our own job fairs and also helping a lot of second career people who've been working in a job and decide that they want to do something that's more meaningful. And I can't think of anything more meaningful than teaching and education. They come to us and we work with PEMA, with some other providers to help them get their certificate while they are in the classroom. So we actually hire them, put them in the classroom, and then help them become certified. We are also recruiting overseas. We have a team right now in Singapore today who are interviewing teachers primarily from the Philippines.
Looking for any subjects?
We are
teaching
looking very specifically for math, science, and special ed. Those are the toughest, but we actually are having difficulty finding, again, top quality, because that's what we want, top quality candidates for third, fourth, fifth grade. In the elements, in some of the positions that we used to have 30, 40 applicants for every opening, we're struggling, to find the top quality.
What's going on with those grades? Why are those suddenly
Not
so
those.
hard?
What I mean by that is just regular classroom teachers
okay.
and regular grade
I
levels.
see.
It's not necessarily third or fourth.
Teachers who teach everything.
Yeah, teachers who teach everything that normally we had an oversupply with. We absolutely do not have an oversupply now.
Vail used to be a leader in getting electronics and computers, digital learning into the classroom. Other districts have made a lot of efforts to catch up. So what's on the horizon for Vail in that topic?
Well, our primary focus is with our Beyond Textbooks program, and it's basically our digitized playbook that we share with other school districts and charters. We started that just to serve our own students and schools, and we now serve schools in every county in Arizona and 5 other states. So we're constantly making improvements to that. We just added a parent portal to that system. And then we're doing things in our own classrooms. We're increasing the amount of coding, and we're focusing in on a single system to help parents connect with teachers so they have the same platform regardless of the grade level, regardless of the school that they're in.
So they don't have to learn a new system
Exactly.
for each kid or each school change.
We really want to keep that communication channel as bright and clear as we possibly can between teachers and parents.
Now to healthcare. As we recorded this next interview, the U.S. Senate was not expected to take any action this week. The bill to reform the Affordable Care Act didn't have enough support, and neither did an effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement health plan. Dana Wolfe Naimark is president and CEO of Children's Action Alliance, following the rapidly changing policy debate. She joined me from Phoenix. Healthcare is changing so fast this week. There was a bill on this, almost on the Senate floor. Now it looks like they won't even take a vote on repealing the Affordable Care Act. As an organization advocating for healthcare, how are you keeping up?
Well, it is a challenge. It does seem like things are changing every 10 minutes. And we have a lot of partner organizations we're working with, both in Arizona and in Washington, D.C. So we help keep each other up to date. And really, we're staying focused on the bottom line, looking for any healthcare reforms that help children and families, that make healthcare higher quality, more affordable, more accessible, more available. And unfortunately, all of the proposals that have been brought forward, the proposal the House passed, the American Health Care Act, and the proposals the Senate was preparing to vote on, none of them improve healthcare for children or families in Arizona. So we think it's a great thing that the Senate does not have the votes to pass that. And I think senators are beginning to really listen to organizations, patients, voters, families in their home states. And it's time that they focus on something better.
You brought up listening to people in the home states. There's been a lot of activism, people showing up at our senators' offices every single day. So you do think that's contributed to maybe the gridlock that Washington is seeing on this issue?
I think a few things have contributed. Definitely the passion by constituents and sometimes anger, and the very high level of engagement. Senators have to notice that. It makes a difference. But also on this issue, there are a wide range of organizations and interests and people opposed to these bills. So we've compiled a list of just the organizations that we know of, and it's a very long list of organizations opposed, and it ranges from business organizations to education, to healthcare, to patient groups, to providers, to children's groups, to organizations representing seniors. So there's such a broad spectrum of constituents and organizations opposed. Again, I think senators have to notice that and pay attention. And I really, honestly, have not heard one Arizona organization articulate why this Senate healthcare bill, the so-called Better Care Reconciliation Act, what would it do that would benefit Arizona? I've not heard one argument to that effect.
So at this point, and as we said, it's changing daily, but at this point, it looks like the status quo is the plan for now. Are there any negatives to that? Are there changes to that that you would like to see?
Well, definitely, the Affordable Care Act is not perfect, and Arizona has felt some of the pains of implementing such a large reform. We felt a lot of the benefits of the Affordable Care Act as well, with so many more people having affordable health care coverage, both parents, adults, seniors, and children. We're at a high level of children with health care coverage. We would not be there without the Affordable Care Act. So there's been a lot of benefits. There has been some adjustment issues, and especially for people who get their care in the marketplace. And if they earn too much to qualify for subsidies, the cost of premiums and deductibles has been very high and prohibitive for some people. So that's an area that definitely needs to be addressed, and also the stability of the marketplace and making sure that health plans have an incentive and have the ways to be involved in the marketplace for the long term so that it's sustainable.
So is Children's Action Alliance actively working on those issues now that there isn't a bill to be talking about?
We are gathering information and ideas from different sources and sectors about what those changes could be and should be, and we certainly will be involved in that, yes.
What can the regular person do to keep up with these changes? I mean, you guys are doing that as an organization, but somebody who just hears that every day there's something new or something changing with healthcare, how can they keep up?
Oh, that's a great question. I think everyday Arizonans, the best thing to do to keep up on issues that you care about is join a group that you feel comfortable with, that represents your values, your concerns. It's much easier and a lot more fun to do this together with other Arizonans. So we really invite folks to join us, Children's Action Alliance at azchildren.org. You can sign up for our Action Network and get regular updates. We don't flood your inbox, but we give you updates when things are changing, and also very specific ways that you can make your voice heard to our senators and our congressional delegation. There are a lot of other organizations as well, so I think the key is finding a group that reflects your own values and priorities and stick with them.
From my perspective, it seems like this issue is just so partisan that it's become solely a partisan issue with very little middle ground that people are finding to relate to each other, and I think that is causing the gridlock. People aren't able to find some middle ground. What can be done? What can be done there?
Well, certainly the call to repeal the Affordable Care Act has been a partisan call. But actually what I've seen in recent weeks is more and more common ground across the political aisle. There are many conservative organizations, business organizations, Republican elected officials who have raised their voices with concerns about the various proposals and who are really focused on the consequences for children, families, seniors, people with disabilities in Arizona and across the country. So I think while the fervor has been very partisan and some of the anger, I actually think that through this process, I'm hearing more common ground about concerns. And Senator McCain issued a statement as he's home recovering from his own healthcare challenges. He issued a statement on Monday saying the next step needs to be getting ideas from both parties, having an open process, talking with the governors across the country. And I think he's absolutely right.
So what are your next steps?
Those will be our next steps, gathering with various partners and organizations who have been involved in fighting some of these proposals, now coming together to talk about what's next. What do we want to see proactively? Honestly, there hasn't been a lot of energy to that because we really had to fight to make sure healthcare survived and make sure that thousands of children and families did not have the rug pulled out from under them. So that's where our energy has been. We have been gathering ideas and proposals about positive, constructive reform steps, and now it's time to really focus on those and put those together. I will say, though, Congress is still talking about reviving some of these dangerous proposals. So it's not over yet, and we need to keep our attention on that as well and make sure something doesn't happen very quickly while we're looking the other way.
Dana Wolfe Naimark, thanks so much for joining us from Phoenix today.
Thank you.
And we'll end on public safety. Pima County Sheriff Mark Napier beat Chris Nanos for the job last year. Nanos was one of the top administrators of the department for decades, including when the Sheriff's Department allegedly misused funds seized in racketeering investigations. Caitlin Schimidt of the Arizona Daily Star uncovered that story and detailed how the money was used. Now, Sheriff Napier is asking the state to investigate the issue, and Attorney General Mark Brnovich says he will. The Star's Schimidt reviewed what happened so far.
In the end of 2015, I wrote a story about a cafe in the sheriff's headquarters and in the jail that was operating without a contract by Chief Deputy Christopher Radke's niece, and it was violating a variety of state laws as far as procurement and contracts go. When I was conducting an interview with one of the department officials, they initially said that the money came from RICO funds, which is federal funds seized in racketeering investigations, but they later came back and said that they were paid for by the general fund. A couple months later, the FBI launched an investigation and found a variety of misappropriation of funds to things that were not for crime fighting or crime prevention purposes, including a menu board for the cafe, some model airplanes, sheriff's banquet materials. And that came to a head in the end of September when Christopher Radke was indicted on several felonies, federal felonies related to misuse of federal funds.
And what happened in his court case?
His court case, in February, he ended up pleading guilty to 3 misdemeanors of theft of federal funds, and in May, he was sentenced to 3 years of probation to be served concurrently, so 1 year total, 100 hours of community service, a fine, and he is barred from working for Pima County or in law enforcement.
And he was the only one charged in that investigation so far?
He was the only one charged. After the sentencing, the U.S. attorney who prosecuted the case said that they found evidence that another individual was more culpable, but that was Bradley Gagnapane, the former chief of staff who took his own life last summer.
So why is Sheriff Napier asking for more investigation from the state at this point?
There was a reaction from the public and members of the department that the sentence for Radke was far too lenient and that law enforcement should perhaps be held to a higher standard in cases like this. So Sheriff Napier went back and spoke to the FBI and the legal advisors and found out that the dual sovereignty doctrine would allow for them to prosecute in a separate jurisdiction, in this case state, to avoid a double jeopardy situation.
Is he asking for an investigation of the same people, the same incidents, or is he asking for it to be broader or different?
He's asking for the same situation, same people, but he's looking to see if any state laws were violated this time around as opposed to federal laws.
And are there any word from the state on what's happening with this so far?
It's tough to say. He initially said that the case would be presented to the Pima County Attorney's Office, who might have to recuse themselves. When I spoke to them last week, they said that they'd received the case and they would look into it. In that case, it would go to the Arizona Attorney General's office.
And is Sheriff Napier himself at any risk in initiating this investigation? Any issues that could follow for the department?
He wasn't in office when any of this was taking place. If anything carried over into his tenure, he could possibly be at risk, but it's tough to say what his involvement is. Surely some of the prior administrators would be at risk.
And can you go into, in your own reporting, I mean, obviously you identified Deputy Radke as somebody who was implicated in this, and the courts took that case. Anybody else that you found in your investigation?
Yeah, I found that several documents had been signed by former Sheriff Clarence Dupnick, who in 2015 he retired, and Chris Nanos, his chief deputy, took over for a year. He also signed several documents leading up to the months before he was defeated in the election by Napier.
Anything else you can tell us?
I think that's it. It should be interesting to see what they find. This case might be far from over.
That's it for us. Next week, we'll look at a new tech center coming to Sahuarita. We leave you now with an excerpt from an Arizona Illustrated story about the 47th annual Juneteenth celebration at Dunbar Spring Cultural Center. Thanks for watching.
With the racism is hovering over America now. And if we don't identify it, if we don't call it what it is, it'll just hover. But if we don't expose the wound of racism, it's going to grow. So this is what this is about right now.
There is a distinct slave narrative that goes throughout American history. And the fact that when slaves were freed, it didn't mean that the African American population gained the level of respect and equality that they deserved. And I think we suffer from that to this day.
We are at the Dunbar Cultural Center. We're having the 47th annual Juneteenth Festival indoors this year.